Hey guys, so I've seen a lot of questions about the state of Ellie in 8.1, and I've seen an equally high number of ignorant answers attempting to actually say just yes or no. So in this video, I'm going to try my best to give you guys a realistic answer of the common question, will Ellie be good in 8.1? So without further ado, let's see if we can dive into this one. So as I kind of alluded to earlier, it's not really a question you can just simply say yes or no to, because in reality, we don't know what Blizzard's intending to do with tuning or anything else like that, but what we do know is what actually changed mechanically. And if you want to know everything that changed mechanically, I do have a video on my YouTube channel going over all the important changes. That's pretty recent, so you might want to check that out first. But there's also the question of, what are you actually looking to be good at? Raids, dungeons, PvP? Fortunately, I've been following the changes well enough that I can kind of give a basic answer to everything, but let's start by looking at raids. So in raids, what is Ellie's current problem, and is it being fixed? The current problem with Ellie is somewhat of a damage thing, but primarily it's a utility thing, because it doesn't actually have high enough damage to just make up for it. So what does Ellie really bring to a raid? It brings a 12-second cooldown interrupt, it brings Tremor Totem, which is unfortunately hasn't really been able to be used much. And then what else does it really bring? It brings some AoE burst and off heals. I mean, Ghost Wolf is kind of a nice utility because you can not be slowed when you move. I think of things like Gahoon Orb Running, but with the 4 Warlocks that was made kind of irrelevant. So Ellie doesn't really bring anything unique. There's no class buff, there's no debuff, there's no immunity. Not particularly good at any one thing, unless Tremor Totem suddenly has a very valuable use, and I can tell you right now that from all of my raid testing, it won't. So that problem, the primary problem, isn't really being fixed. What is the other problem? It just doesn't do enough damage to make up for the fact that the primary problem exists. You could have a lack of utility, and as long as you do enough damage, it doesn't really matter because you're still going to be brought for the damage. You probably wouldn't stack shamans or anything, but you'd bring one just for the extra damage if there's enough room in the ranged roster, that is. For things like melee, you generally wouldn't bring something like that because there's only room for 4 or 5, but for ranged, there's generally room to bring something just because it does good damage. Ellie Shaman didn't really fit that role either. Warcraft logs can be a little deceiving because a lot of the very good shamans have rerolled to something else for progression, so it does look a little lower than it probably actually is. But Ellie damage wasn't particularly good either. I would definitely say it was below average. Is that being fixed? Kinda. So with the new talents, you have more like single target options, and I think the potential to do more damage is definitely there. And then another problem Ellie had in raids was it has very bad damage while moving. It can do things while moving, but the damage it does is pretty lackluster like most casters. There are a few outliers for this, like Affliction Warlock, Fire Mage, and BM Hunter, but the rest of the casters all pretty much have the same problem of just not doing that much damage while moving, Ellie being one of the worst offenders for that. But now, they have buffed Ice Fury pretty significantly, and this means that you now have an option for movement-intensive fights. This allows you to spec accordingly and be able to do damage while moving a lot better. However, this is a pretty hard build to play, so some players may have some issues with this, and some players have notoriously disliked this, but I personally really like the option of having Ice Fury, and I think that will go a long way in helping us do more damage on raid fights, and I've actually used it on quite a few fights on raid testing, and unfortunately I cannot show you these because we are privating everything about that, private streams and everything. We don't want to leak any of our strats because that's the one thing that we have going for us, being a guild that streams all of progression and everything. But nonetheless, I have tested, and I can tell you right now that out of all the bosses I tested, I didn't really feel like a burden on anything between having the option for Ice Fury and then having Surge of Power and Stormkeeper doing so much damage. I didn't feel like an outlier. I wasn't particularly amazing, but I definitely wasn't feeling bad either. I felt pretty good. Now, of course, tuning can change this at any moment, so the damage part is kind of a gamble of, will they tune us well, or will they tune us poorly? Who knows? And unfortunately, with the utility being the way it is, if they don't tune us well, we're probably going to be stuck in the same boat as we are right now in rating, but with a little more options at least, and a little more single target burst, so we should never be as bad as we are right now, but worst case scenario, we'll be a little bit better. Now, if we're talking about dungeons, that is a quite different story. So let me give you a little background on what the dungeon meta looks like right now. As it stands in 8.0, you bring one Demon Hunter for the damage and utility and the debuff, and then you bring some spec of Rogue for Shroud, the low cooldown interrupt along with the Demon Hunter, the single target stuns, the burst damage. Like, you bring 2 melee either way, even if it's not those 2 specific specs. Low cooldown interrupt in the dungeons with so many interrupts, stuns in these dungeons with so many casts. That's 2 melee is pretty good to have, and that's what almost every high key is doing. They're all bringing 2 melee. Then the range spot is a bit of a flex. At the moment, ideally you want a Boomkin or a Frost Mage, but really, anything can kinda go there if it does enough damage. Ideally, a Shaman could be pretty good, because we have the low cooldown interrupt as well. You could even potentially bring 2 ranged if you have an LE Shaman because of the low cooldown interrupt, the AoE stun, the AoE slow, and it also has the burst for the Gahoonies and stuff if you save your stuff properly, especially with the Stormkeeper change and Ice Fury if you're using that. So I see a lot of potential for LE Shaman in Mythic Plus in 8.1. At the moment, LE looks like it's pretty bad because of lack of representation, but that's more because so many players have rerolled for rating that most of the players that would be doing high keys as an LE Shaman aren't really doing that because they are playing something else. But I believe if LE Shaman had equal representation in terms of just having highly geared specs, it could be a very, very good ranged. I wouldn't say like the best, but I definitely would say it would be up there, probably right behind the Boomkin Frostmage meta. It would be probably the second best range choice behind those 2. I guess third best in that case. And in 8.1, we could be some kind of dark horse. No one really sees this coming that I've talked to. But 8.1, you may not change your talents at all. You go Earth and Rage, which will actually be beneficial for AoE over Echo. Finally have an AoE option on this tier. You can go with like the same thing you're going right now, Liquid Magma Totem, Stormily, Primal Elementalist, and then Stormkeeper. And with the Stormkeeper buff, that suddenly means you have good single target as well, being the best single target talent and the best AoE talent. And then everything else would stay the same, except for Earth and Rage also improves our damage. I see a lot of potential for LE to be the go-to range for high Mythic Plus keys, especially with Primal Elementalist giving us a second defensive, as well as Astral Shift, Spirit Wolf if you really need it. We already don't have that many issues surviving, because just the way keys are in BFA, you don't really have it TPS dying to things as often as you have tanks or just attrition deaths and stuff like that. But I definitely see a lot of potential for LE to be very, very good in dungeons. Now don't quote me on it saying it's going to be the best or anything, but I wouldn't be surprised if LEs are suddenly much more sought after in Mythic Plus in 8.1. Now PvP is the last topic I'm going to talk about here, and that is something I am not quite as experienced with. I am a hardcore raider, I enjoy doing higher keys. In PvP I'm only like a 2200 player, not even as LE, so if you disagree with something I'm saying, feel free to have a discussion about this in the comments, feel free to flame me about it. I don't want to say with confidence that any of the things I'm saying are correct, but this is from my point of view and the point of view of a lot of people that I've talked to in Earthshrine that are higher end PvPers than I am. But what I believe LE in PvP is going to be in 8.1 is very, very good. So as it stands, LE really isn't horrible in PvP. You need very specific trait setup, that being 3 Lava Shocks, and you basically just try to gimmick people with a big Earth Shock into another Earth Shock with Sky Fury Totem, along with your partner's burst, and you try to just kill someone in like 2 globals. Sometimes it works if you crit, sometimes it doesn't. But with 8.1, suddenly we have a much more consistent way to do this burst. So you got Surge of Power, you got Stormkeeper, I'm in war mode so I can actually test this. You can also go Call the Thunder, and now your only real issue is going to be getting the Maelstrom to do it. So I have 180 Maelstrom currently as my highest. Let's drag this on my bar somewhere. So you gotta get the Maelstrom, which can take a little bit, so I'm gonna drop Fire here to generate some more. And then once you have enough Maelstrom, actually just throw this over here so I can generate even faster. But once you get the Maelstrom, which could take a little bit, and that could be kind of our downfall there, but as soon as you have it, I'm at 150 right now, you can do a lot of damage. So I'm at 180. I can do 2 Earthshocks in a row that will both stun, and I can also use Stormkeeper to proc Surge of Power with an extra overload and extra damage on all of them. So let me let this fall off real quick. Drop my combat. Going to Flame Shock here, pop my Unused Trinket, pop my Sky Fury thing, pop all my cooldowns, do that 52k, another one, and you're also keeping this target stunned the entire time. And you get 3 Earthshocks after all the Maelstrom, potentially even 4, which I just got here with 1 Lava Burst. That is a lot of damage. I did like 300k damage in that small little window, and you can do that pretty consistently. As long as the enemy lets you get off that Stormkeeper cast and doesn't CC you the entire 15 seconds, if you get Maelstrom capped and then cast Stormkeeper, you could probably kill someone almost guaranteed. Now something else that I want to show you is Lightning Lasso. Apparently this has a lot of damage now. He's immune to stuns. That's awkward. Okay, we'll talk about something else in the meantime. Ice Fury, if you don't want to go for like a gimmick comp with the Surge of Power Stormkeeper, you can just go Ice Fury and go for more consistent damage, because Ice Fury does hit quite hard now. Not the spell itself, but the Frost Shocks. 24k Frost Shock, pretty big Frost Shock. You can do that every 30 seconds. It gives you something to do while you're moving, a really fast generator, much more consistent. If you're playing with like an Affliction Warlock or something, like an old LSD comp, and you're looking to kind of rot people down and just last a long time, that could be a really good option for that as well. If the meta changes away from like the melee cleaves, that could be really good. However, the Surge of Power thing is awesome for crazy fast burst. Looks like my Lightning Lasso's back. Let's try it again. Lightning Lasso does 40% of the target's maximum health and nature damage over 6 seconds. That is a lot of damage. So I do want to show one problem with it though. So obviously I don't need to show the damage because it's 48% of a target's maximum health. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Let's go ahead and stun a target here. Get the DR going and then Lightning Lasso. As you can see, the cast is reduced, meaning the damage is also reduced. Pretty unfortunate. At least I believe the damage is reduced. However, I should probably test this real quick, so I will be right back. Just to confirm, I was correct, the damage is reduced because you get less ticks due to the reduced uptime. So while this is definitely very good, I do think it is a bit overrated because 1, it is a channel. 2, it causes a stun DR. Even if you get interrupted almost immediately, you still proc the DR on the stun. And 3, if a stun is already diminished, then the damage is also reduced. So I think in like 3s, this might be really hard to make use of. You could like play with a Fire Mage and get them to do kicks or something, probably one of the DPS, and then go ham with the Lightning Lasso. But I think it's going to be a pretty situational thing. I don't think it's actually quite as good as people make it out to be. But one thing, yeah, you can actually move while doing it though, so that's pretty nice. You can probably do this and then run behind a pillar. So there is definitely a lot of potential for this talent, but I do think it's a little overrated. But that is just my opinion. I could be completely wrong. But that's what I think of Ellie in PvP. I think it's going to be really, really good. And then I expect it to get nerfed pretty hard, and I think it's going to be pretty good still because there's just so much potential to do burst. It's probably still going to have a relatively high skill floor, because it is still a pretty squishy spec. It has a very low mobility. So it's going to be hard to survive as, and that is the hardest thing in PvP, in my opinion, is surviving properly while still doing damage. So we'll see where it ends up, but I do believe it's going to be a very good PvP spec. So just to quickly summarize my thoughts and everything I said in this video, I believe in raids, Ellie is going to be still not some crazy outlier. I don't think it's going to be particularly good, but you have a lot more options to do more damage, so I don't think it's going to be as bad either. And it has potential to be really good. It just depends on tuning, but tuning hasn't historically gone in our favor that much, so we'll see how it ends up. In Mythic Plus, I think Ellie could be a dark horse. I think it could be very, very, very good. It could be the go-to ranged if you have access to one. And I am pretty excited to begin doing the higher keys on my Shaman in 8.1. And then in PvP, I think it's going to be excellent. And I also think it's going to get nerfed because it's a little ridiculous right now if you set up the combos right. But again, that's not my most experience. Most of my experience is PvE, so I could be wrong about that, but that is my opinion. And if you want to see some LE 8.1 in action, I do intend to start my stream quite a bit earlier than usual on Tuesday of 8.1 releasing, and I'm going to pug some keys, going to do some raids, going to do whatever I can to just test out the spec, do some skirmishes or whatever. So if you guys want to see that, link in the description to my Twitch channel. But thanks for watching, guys. I hope I could answer your question a little more realistically than some of the previous answers you've been seeing. Give a more analytical point of view. But anyways, thanks again for watching. Hope you guys have some fun in 8.1 is Ellie, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.